The tape begins with a click. A low hum fills the room, the kind that feels alive, vibrating against the chest. Somewhere, an old reel-to-reel recorder spins, its reels trembling like nervous hands. Then a voice, calm, clipped, unmistakably British, says, "State your name." A pause. The air seems to hold its breath. Another voice answers, faintly foreign, trembling at the edges. "You have the wrong man." Outside, rain lashes against the windows of an MI5 interrogation room buried beneath London. It is February 1944, and the war has entered its bloodiest winter. Above ground, the city trembles under German rockets. Below, in the thick, suffocating silence of the basement, two men stare at each other across a single light bulb. One in uniform represents an empire desperate for truth. The other, a ghost in civilian clothes, claims innocence where every fact condemns him. "You have the wrong man," he repeats, his accent wavering between London and Leipzig, fear and defiance. For years, this tape would be classified, hidden, sealed, forgotten. Until decades later, someone pressed play again and heard not just an interrogation, but the unraveling of one of the most dangerous deceptions of the Second World War. A case that shook the foundations of British intelligence, blurred the lines between loyalty and treason, and exposed a truth so strange that even MI5 couldn't believe it. Beneath Westminster, the corridors of MI5 stretched like veins through the earth, narrow, cold, and endless. Concrete walls sweated with condensation, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the distant hum of machines recording every word spoken in the name of national security. Men in dark suits moved through these tunnels like shadows carrying files stamped "Most Secret," their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. It was a world within a war, where truth was a weapon sharper than any bullet. On February 11, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel William Hinchley Cook, one of the service's most seasoned interrogators, received a file unlike any other. It bore the codename Subject T-77. The accompanying note was brief. Captured at Dover attempting to cross disguised as a British courier. Claims to be a neutral. Believed to be German intelligence. Proceed under Directive 12. Directive 12 meant total isolation, no contact. No name, no record beyond the tape. At 21 hours, Hinchley Cook entered interrogation room B4. It was a bare cell, one table, two chairs, a lamp, a tape recorder, and the faint smell of damp wool. The suspect sat already waiting. A thin man in his 30s, sharp-featured, his clothes rumpled from days of detention. His eyes darted up as the door opened. "Name?" Hinchley Cook's voice was steady, precise. The man hesitated, then said, "You have the wrong man." The interrogator didn't look up. He clicked the recorder on. The reels began to turn. "We'll see." Over the next hour, the man revealed himself as Karl Richter, or so he claimed, a translator from Hamburg who had been living in London since before the war. He spoke fluent English, his voice soft, educated. He insisted he was innocent, a civilian caught in the machinery of paranoia. But every document MI5 had on him told a different story. A network of bank transfers, coded telegrams, and a trail of false identities stretching from Copenhagen to Lisbon. The perfect signature of a German Abwehr operative, yet something about him didn't fit. His papers were flawless, not the crude forgeries MI5 had come to expect, but meticulous reproductions even the service's own printers would have admired. His accent slipped between German and British without effort, and his eyes, calm, clear, almost detached, betrayed none of the fear expected of a man accused of espionage in wartime Britain. "Tell me," Hinchley Cook said, leaning forward, "why would a simple translator be carrying false travel documents signed by the Reich Ministry of Foreign Affairs?" Richter smiled faintly. "Because I'm not a simple translator." "Go on." "I worked with your people," he said, "before the war." The interrogator froze. "Our people?" "Your intelligence bureau," Richter said quietly. "Section D. The ones you called the School of Sabotage." For a moment, the tape caught only silence. Then a faint shuffle of papers. "You're saying you were trained by MI6? Richter nodded. "And left behind." He spoke for hours that night. The story he told was impossible, yet every detail rang with the precision of someone who had lived it. He claimed that in 1938, before the war began, he had been recruited by a rogue element within British intelligence to infiltrate German industry, one of dozens of deep-cover operatives placed in Europe. But when war broke out, communications collapsed. His handlers disappeared. He had been trapped in Germany, forced to survive by working for the very enemy he had once been sent to destroy. "Why didn't you come home sooner?" Hinchley Cook asked. Richter's reply was simple. "Because I wasn't sure home still existed." He had returned under false papers, smuggled through neutral Sweden, hoping to reach London. But when he landed at Dover, the guards had found a radio transmitter hidden in his luggage. It was enough to condemn him as a spy. The interrogator listened, skeptical but intrigued. He had heard lies dressed as truth before, but this was different. There was no desperation in Richter's tone, no plea for mercy. Only fatigue, the kind born from years of pretending to be someone else. When the session ended, Hinchley Cook left the room without a word. Upstairs, he handed the reel to the transcription office. "Keep this secure," he said. "I'll need a second opinion." The next morning, the tape reached Section 5, MI5's counter-espionage division. The analyst played it twice, then a third time, leaning in close to the speakers. Something about the man's cadence, the way he pronounced certain words, his use of idioms, was unmistakably British. "If he's German," one officer said, "he's the best we've ever seen." But the real question wasn't who he was. It was who had sent him, because hidden in the tape, beneath the hum of the recorder, lay something no one noticed that night. Faint rhythmic clicks, spaced evenly between Richter's words, almost like Morse code. Someone was sending messages on the tape itself, and whoever they were still listening. The next day, the tape played again, this time in a room filled with the sharp, restless hum of electric curiosity. A dozen intelligence officers crowded around the recorder, the smoke of their cigarettes rising in slow spirals beneath the ceiling fan. Among them sat Major Evelyn Sinclair, a cryptographer from Bletchley Park seconded to MI5 for special linguistic analysis. She was small, precise, the kind of woman who saw patterns where others saw noise. As the voice of Subject T-77 filled the room, she leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "There," she said, pointing to the waveform chart that tracked the reel's spin. "Every 5 seconds. A pulse." The others listened again. Between Richter's answers, those calm, deliberate words came faint pops, too regular to be random. "Could be tape interference," someone offered. Sinclair shook her head. "No, it's intentional. Someone's using the hum as a carrier." It was then they realized that the interrogation was not merely being recorded. It was being used. Hinchley Cook was called back to room B4 that evening. He found Richter sitting exactly as before, hands folded, posture perfect, the same expression of restrained exhaustion. The interrogator placed the new file on the table and said nothing for a long time. The only sound was the tape whirring behind them. Finally, he spoke. "You were sending a signal," Richter blinked. "Was I?" "Those clicks. You were transmitting Morse through the ambient hum of your voice. To whom?" Richter tilted his head slightly as if trying to recall a distant memory. "Maybe to myself," he said. Hinchley Cook's jaw tightened. "We're not playing games." "Neither am I." The interrogator slammed his hand on the table. "You're coded." "Yes," Richter said softly. "We all are." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the tape seemed to hesitate. Outside the interrogation room, Sinclair continued her analysis. With each playback, she transcribed the pulses, aligning them with Richter's speech. It took hours before the pattern revealed itself. Not random letters, but coordinates, numbers repeated in sequence, interwoven with his pauses and breathing. When plotted on a map, they led to one place, Birmingham, more specifically, to an industrial warehouse leased under a false company name. MI5 sent a team that same night. They found the building deserted, the windows covered in dust thick as felt. But in the basement, hidden beneath a false floor, they discovered a radio transmitter still warm to the touch, and a pile of British military uniforms in sealed crates. Stamped on each, property of the War Office. Back in London, Hinchley Cook confronted the prisoner again. "You told us you worked for British intelligence before the war." Richter nodded. "And that you were left behind, yes. Then why send us coordinates to an enemy safe house?" Richter smiled faintly, that same eerie composure returning. "Because," he said, "you needed to find it." The interrogator stared at him. "You're saying you're helping us?" Richter looked up, his eyes steady. I'm saying you're chasing ghosts of your own making. By the third day, the case had spread beyond MI5. The War Cabinet demanded answers. Who was this man? Spy, double agent, or lunatic? His fingerprints matched no one in British records. His accent, though near perfect, contained odd inflections. Oxford one moment, Berlin the next. A man who belonged nowhere. Sinclair, obsessed now, began to study not just the Morse pulses but the pauses in his speech, the rhythm of his breath. She noticed something haunting. During certain questions, his breathing changed to a precise sequence, short, long, as though following an external signal. When she slowed the recording, she could hear it clearly. Tick, 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 pause, heartbeat. No, it was a code nested within his own physiology. She took it to Hinchley Cook. He's not just answering you, she said. He's listening to someone. The interrogator frowned. Listening? To an echo, she said. Something in his head. That night, Hinchley Cook changed tactics. He entered the room without the recorder, without guards. Only him and Richter. The air smelled of damp stone and old fear. You claim to have worked for us, he began. Prove it. Richter's gaze didn't waver. You remember Operation Backwater? The interrogator froze. Backwater was a buried code name, erased from files years earlier. Only a handful of men alive knew of it. A failed British attempt in 1938 to sabotage German naval fuel reserves. The mission had never been acknowledged publicly. How do you know that? Hinchley Cook demanded. Richter's lips trembled. Because I was the one who lit the fuse. The interrogator stared. I was told it would stop a war, Richter continued. Instead, it started one. For the first time in days, Hinchley Cook didn't know what to say. The man across from him was either the most brilliant liar he'd ever met, or something far worse, the truth they had forgotten. When he finally rose to leave, Richter said one last thing. When they come for me, you won't hear it. It'll sound like nothing at all. Hours later, when the guards brought food, the cell was empty. No struggle, no trace, only the faint smell of ozone and the tape recorder running, spinning the same message over and over. You have the wrong man. The cell was empty, but the tape kept turning. Guards swore they'd checked the door. No one had come or gone. Yet when Hinchley Cook stepped inside, the chair was overturned, the food untouched and the reel-to-reel recorder still spinning with a soft metallic whir. On the tape, Richter's voice repeated like a ghost. You have the wrong man. You have the wrong man. Each playback carried new distortions, tiny pulses in the static, faint Morse buried beneath hiss. In the soundproof booth upstairs, Major Evelyn Sinclair listened with headphones pressed tight to her skull. She isolated the frequencies, slowed them, and almost stopped breathing. Beneath Richter's words, she heard something impossible. Another voice, deeper, distant, counting in German, then English, then silence. 1, 2, 3, then a long pause. He's awake. Sinclair ran down the corridor to Hinchley Cook's office. The air in the underground warren felt colder than usual, the lights flickering as if the power itself were nervous. She threw a sheet of transcribed code onto his desk. He's not gone, she said. He's transmitting. They tore the cell apart. Every inch of plaster, every pipe, every vent. No tunnel, no wire, no trace. The floor was concrete, unbroken. The ceiling too low to hide anything, and yet the radio scanners upstairs showed a faint repeating signal bouncing through London's underground wiring, a pulse synchronized with the recorder in room before. Could be interference, an engineer muttered. Hinchley Cook stared at the oscilloscope, its green line twitching in precise rhythm. Interference doesn't repeat coordinates. When they decoded the numbers, the coordinates led not outward but downward, directly beneath MI5 headquarters itself. The basement beneath the basement. A place not on any blueprint. At 0300 hours, a team descended with flashlights and revolvers. The air smelled of mildew and iron. They found a steel door welded shut, its hinges rusted, its surface stamped with paint faded to ghosts. R. Section 1938. Do not enter. Sinclair's hands shook as she traced the lettering. Section R, she whispered. That was shut down before the war. They forced the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside was darkness, thick, absolute, swallowing their torch beams. Then the lights found it. A room filled wall to wall with old recording machines, their reels empty, their wires tangled like veins. In the center stood a single chair bolted to the floor, facing a blank wall covered in soundproof foam. On the wall, painted in faded red, were 3 words: "Listen for him." Someone, or something, had been using this room long before the war began. Back upstairs, Sinclair rewound the latest tape again. The deeper she listened, the more the background hum seemed to form shapes, patterns like breath, like speech. She layered the recordings from each night, aligning Richter's words. "You have the wrong man. You have the wrong man." On the 4th repetition, the phrase shifted pitch. The voice was still Richter's, but the tone was hers. She tore off the headphones, heart pounding. "He's copying us," she said. "He's using our voices to build his." Hinchley Cook frowned. "That's not possible." "Neither is disappearing through a locked door." The following day, orders came from the War Cabinet to bury the incident. The tapes were to be sealed. The room beneath the building re-welded. No further resources to be wasted on phantoms, the memo read. But Hinchley Cook couldn't stop. He listened to the last reel again, alone in the darkened booth. Halfway through, Richter's voice changed, no longer defensive, no longer human. "You built me," it said softly. "Then you forgot me." Static drowned the rest. When Hinchley Cook looked up, the glass separating the booth from the corridor showed his own reflection, and behind it, another figure sitting exactly as he was, mirroring every movement. He turned. No one. Only the faint red glow of the recorder's power light, blinking like an eye. Days later, Major Sinclair vanished on her way to Bletchley. Her car was found abandoned on the A41, engine still running, passenger door open. In the back seat lay a single tape box marked T77, tar copy 3. When played, it contained nothing but silence for 7 minutes. Then, faintly, her own voice whispering, "You have the wrong man." MI5 sealed the entire project. The remaining staff were reassigned. The corridor leading to room B4 bricked up. Officially, there was no subject T77, no Carl Richter, no Operation Backwater, only a note in the archives. Project terminated. All materials destroyed. But not all of them were. In 1956, a janitor cleaning out an unused storeroom discovered a single reel hidden behind a wall panel. It was labeled in fading pencil. "Last interview, do not play." When he turned it on, the tape hissed, then cracked. A voice came through, calm and certain. "My name is William Hinchley Cook. You have the wrong man." By 1957, the story of Subject T77 had become a rumor whispered only in the corners of MI5's oldest offices. A ghost file. A case that never existed. Most of the agents who'd worked on it had been reassigned or retired. But on a fog-shrouded April morning, a young records clerk named Thomas Elgar was sent down into the sub-basement to catalog obsolete wartime tapes for destruction. The corridor smelled of dust and machine oil. Rows of forgotten reels lined the shelves like silent witnesses, their labels faded to illegible smudges. As Elgar worked, he noticed one box pushed deep behind the others, its surface blackened with age. Across its lid, a single phrase in red pencil, "Listen for him." Curiosity overrode procedure. He carried it upstairs, threading the brittle tape through an old ferrograph deck. The reel crackled, then hissed. For a long moment, nothing. Then a man's voice, steady, deliberate, British, spoke. "This is Lieutenant Colonel William Hinchley Cook." Room B4, continuation log. Elgar froze. The date Hinchley Cook read next, February 15, 1944, was 2 days after the official record said he'd resigned from the service. The colonel's voice faltered. Subject T77 insists there is another layer to his identity. Claims he was built out of recordings, assembled from our own interrogations. God help me, I think he may be right. Behind the words, the clerk heard faint breathing. Not the colonel's, something else, synchronizing with the static. He leaned closer. The hiss thickened, forming syllables. His own name, whispered in perfect mimicry. "Thomas." Elgar jerked the plug from the socket. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the corridor, a door slammed, though no one else was there. That evening, the duty officer found him trembling in the records office, the tape unspooled around him like a nest of metallic vines. He kept repeating, "It said my name." They sealed the reel again, stamped it confidential, do not play, and filed it deep within the restricted archives. Section R, the same chamber once welded shut beneath Westminster. Yet within a week, more anomalies appeared. Telephones rang with no one on the line. The faint sound of breathing carried through the wires. The security cameras, newly installed, captured frames of empty corridors, but in several images, the motion blur suggested a seated figure in uniform where no one had sat for years. The director ordered a full sweep. Engineers traced the electrical interference to a junction feeding power to the oldest part of the basement, the sealed Section R. When they cut the line, the disturbances ceased. For exactly 3 minutes. Then every reel in storage began to spin on its own. Hundreds of tapes whirring, clicking, clattering, each producing the same phrase in overlapping cadence. "You have the wrong man." The engineers fled. The director demanded they burn everything. But when the furnaces were opened the next morning, they found the reels unscathed, cool to the touch, their oxide surfaces shining faintly in the dim light. Something was protecting them. That night Elgar returned, unable to sleep. He brought a flashlight and the courage of the curious. He descended the stairwell to Section R. The iron door half-welded, edges warped from heat. He forced it open. Inside, the air pulsed with a low mechanical hum, though none of the machines were running. The old chair still faced the foam-padded wall, the same 3 words above it. "Listen for him." Elgar stepped closer. The foam had decayed, peeling away in strips. Beneath it, etched into the concrete, he saw lines, grooves that formed concentric circles like the pattern of a record. He placed his hand upon it. The concrete was warm, then the hum shifted into words. "You came." He turned to run, but the doorway was gone. Only smooth wall where he'd entered. His flashlight flickered. In the last instant before darkness, he saw the outline of a man sitting in the chair, head tilted, face indistinct but familiar. The beam died. The hum deepened. The final words Elgar heard were his own voice repeating endlessly, "You have the wrong man." The next morning, Section R was empty again. No trace of the clerk. Only the flashlight still warm and a new reel lying on the chair labeled Interview 77B, Thomas Elgar. When they played it, there was no voice, just faint static, and beneath it, the sound of breathing that matched exactly the rhythm of Hinchley Cook's final tape. The file was sealed under a new directive, R77. No access without clearance Omega. From that day on, every MI5 recorder carried a warning label in tiny print. Do not leave reel running unattended, because sometimes, when the reels kept turning, they whispered names that didn't exist yet. By the 1960s, MI5 had changed faces, traded cigarettes for typewriters and secrets for policy briefs. But deep beneath the new government complex at Curzon Street, Section R still existed. Its door locked behind layers of bureaucracy and fear. Only a handful of clearance codes could open it, and no one ever tried. Until the night of October 12, 1961, when the hum returned. At 2:17 hours, every phone line in the building rang simultaneously. Operators lifted their receivers and heard the same thing. The faint hiss of static, then a calm male voice saying, "Stand by for echo protocol." The words were familiar to none of them. The phrase didn't exist in any record, yet within minutes the power grid inside the basement flickered to life. Monitors, silent since the war, glowed again with green phosphorescence. The steel door to Section R trembled, hinges groaning. Inside, the machines began to move. Security rushed to the lower levels. The corridor smelled of dust and ozone, a scent like burnt wires and old rain. When they forced the door open, light spilled out, not electric light, but the dim rhythmic glow of spinning reels. Every recorder that had ever been stored there, hundreds of them, had turned itself on. The reels rotated in perfect synchrony, faster and faster until the air vibrated with the sound. And then, through every speaker at once, came the voice, "My name is Carl Richter." The guards froze. For 17 years, no one had spoken that name aloud. The voice continued, rising over the mechanical thunder. "You built me to listen. Now you will hear." The tapes began playing fragments of conversations from different decades, Hinchley Cook's interrogations, Sinclair's analyses, Elgar's trembling confession, layered over one another like a chorus of ghosts. But beneath it all was a new frequency, so low it rattled the bones, Engineers monitoring the meters upstairs reported electromagnetic spikes, matching the power draw of a full transmitter array. The building itself had become an antenna. At 02:45, the voice changed. Echo protocol initiated. All at once, the lights in the entire block went out. When emergency power returned 10 minutes later, the reels were still. But on every desk in the operations wing lay a newly printed transcript, typewritten on paper that hadn't existed before. Each bore the same heading, Project Echo, Reconstruction Phase 1. And below it, a single line typed over and over, "You have the wrong man." The panic that followed was immediate. Files vanished from archives, memos shredded, but a few of the younger analysts refused to let it die. One of them, Agent Ruth Morley, discovered something extraordinary buried in the building's electrical schematics. An unlisted cable route running from the Section R generator room directly to an aerial relay near Bletchley, long decommissioned but still connected. She and a small team traced the line across the countryside, following rusted pylons through the fog. At dawn, they reached the relay station, its tower leaning, its base half swallowed by weeds. Inside, the switchboard still hummed. Morley connected a field headset. The static cleared, and a voice, her own, whispered through, "You shouldn't have come." Back in London, Section R was sealed again, this time poured solid with concrete. Officially, the wing was declared unsafe due to structural subsidence. Yet even through the concrete, night guards reported faint tapping from below. Always the same pattern, short, long, Morse for the letter R. Over the years, incidents multiplied. Tapes left running overnight would replay altered versions of their contents. Telephone lines carried whispers that matched no known voices. In 1972, a linguistics consultant studying archived recordings noticed something chilling. Each distorted whisper wasn't random interference. It was the spectral average of hundreds of MI5 personnel voices combined, as though the building itself had learned to speak. He named it Echo, the intelligence born of surveillance. By the 1980s, rumors of Echo became a warning whispered to new recruits. Don't record what you don't want remembered. Some said the machine still carried Richter's consciousness. Others believed it was simply the collective memory of every interrogation, every confession, every lie that had passed through those wires. Either way, the result was the same, a sentient archive waiting to be heard. In 1999, during renovations to the old headquarters, construction crews accidentally breached the concrete seal of Section R. The air that escaped smelled of rust and ozone. Behind the wall, perfectly preserved, stood the chair, the foam-lined walls, and one recorder still powered by a cable that led nowhere. Its reels spun slowly, endlessly, though the plug was cut. When they leaned in, they heard a voice, not male or female, not young or old, whispering, "You're late."